What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astrodfs, bringing you a brand new video. Today's video, Week 5, quarterback and running backs to play in DFS. So, yeah, we're starting to get a lot less games each Sunday. Bye weeks are going to happen, right? We have the London game Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday night. So, already 4 games off of the main slate, plus some bye week teams. So, we're going to get more limited on plays that we have. You're going to see ownership kind of get larger on some of these plays. I mean, you can look the spreadsheet. There's no scrolling on the spreadsheet this week, so kind of showing what we have to work with all in just one page. Pretty simple. So Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, the only two quarterbacks above 8K. Patrick Mahomes I have as a cash play, right? I think most people do. Probably one of the safer cash plays to play. But with that, you're paying a high salary. And if you're playing Mahomes, there's a good chance you're playing Travis Kelce as well. If you like the game too, Justin Jefferson's on the other side. You're using almost all your salary on those 3 players in this matchup. So that'll be interesting to see of what ownership looks like. But yeah, looking at it, Patrick Mahomes 21.6 DraftKings points a game. Minnesota allowing 20.7. So the numbers are kind of there as far as what Mahomes should expect, right? Second best PFF pass block advantage, which is always good. Highest total on the slate at 52.5 as of right now. The only other one is Philly and LA. They're at 50. Some other decently 45 and above, but there's not a whole lot that looks really good on paper right now. But yeah, Kansas City, it's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, right? Minnesota secondary, I don't think is very good. I don't think they're one of the worst, but I definitely don't think they're average. They're definitely below average. But Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce is the play that you have to do if you're stacking Kansas City. We'll get into Kansas City wide receivers in the next video, but Rashid Rice is probably another name that stands out to me as of right now. But Mahomes Kelce is a good stack. We'll obviously get to tight ends as well. Not in this video, but the next one. But yeah, everything says Patrick Mahomes against Minnesota, safe, great play. But that means you're not paying up for some of these wide receivers. There's some okay wide receivers in this slate. I think there's a lot of cheap, good wide receivers as well, but running backs is definitely a play, right? There's not a lot of cheap running backs, which we'll go over here shortly. So Mahomes, you're going to have to pay up. Jalen Hurts, same thing. I don't have him at cash necessarily right now. The Rams defense has definitely played better than I think most people would have expected based off of just looking at paper. But they played quarterbacks really, really well so far this year. Jalen Hurts obviously being a really good fantasy quarterback, good quarterback in general, don't get me wrong, but really good for fantasy, getting the rushing upside, the rushing touchdowns. But yeah, Philly has the 4th highest team total. Kansas City has number 2. Miami number 1. Like I said, it's the other game with the 50 over under. And with, what we could see out of the Rams offense, right? Philly plays the run really well. The Rams have been passing really well without Cooper Kupp, and now it looks like they're going to get Cooper Kupp back. So we could see Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, even Dallas Goedert. We could see a really good game coming out of Philly's pass game. So 8,000 Jalen Hurts, I definitely think is playable. It's just if I had to pick one between Mahomes and Hurts, I'm picking Mahomes as of right now. That's kind of why I have the difference there. Tua, though, is the next quarterback we have. I have him as a cash play right now at 7,100 against the Giants. Giants' defense is just very bad, right? Their offense is even worse, which makes their defense look even worse. And I think the defense is not all that bad, right? They're inexperienced secondary. They have some good pieces inside that box. But with how bad the offense is, it makes that defense look even worse. The only concern I have with Tua, right? So they have the highest team implied total, which means they're projected to score the most points. I think it's 30. But they have the third worst PFF pass block advantage. But you have to factor in. So you see that, and you have to factor in too, it has one of the quickest releases in football, right? He gets the ball off so fast because of the motions they do, the speed guys they have. So them having the third worst PFF pass block advantage on paper looks bad, but when you realize how Miami uses Tua, it's not as bad as that. So the third worst PFF doesn't concern me at all. Him being a boomer bust quarterback, like he's either scored over 30 fantasy points or he scored under 15, right? And that's concerning when you have a cash play. But you have to factor in Miami run game has been really good. Devon Achane has looked so good. Raheem Mostert hasn't looked bad. We won't say bad, but I won't say really good either. Kind of sloppy at times. But with the slate of quarterbacks you have, you don't have a lot of options this week, right? You can look at my chart. I only have a select few on it. It's very, very limited of what you can do. But Tua 7,100, that Miami pass game should be able to definitely put up some points against the Giants. My only concern is Miami's run game overtakes the pass game, right? They just run the ball so well. They get ahead that they don't need to pass the ball for over 200 yards, right? I still think they will. They will. But that is my only concern. But Tua at 7,100 is a $1,100 pay down from Mahomes, so I like that one. Kirk Cousins, another one I have here at 6,900 against Kansas City, right? They still have a high team implied total. It's a top 10 in total this week, not just on the Sunday main slate. Of all games, they have a top 10 team implied total, right? The 52.5 over under, so that's what you want. With how Kansas City's offense is, even in the run game, if they do what Kansas City does, and it's a good bet against opposing quarterbacks, is Kansas City scores so much, the other team doesn't run the ball, they pass a lot. So Kirk Cousins, that pass game looked really good. To start, kind of shaky recently, but we know the capabilities of Jordan Addison to help someone like Justin Jefferson, to where Jordan Addison clearly 0 fantasy points. TJ Hawkinson, limited as well. KJ Osborne, but Justin Jefferson's gonna get his, and it's if Addison, Hawkinson, and Osborne get those opportunities, the play calling's right, like that Minnesota passing offense could be really good and a really good tournament play, right? Mahomes and them score a lot of points, 28 points. There's a good chance that a $1,300 pay down to Kirk Cousins can't get pretty close to Mahomes on this slate. So that's something you have to factor in. Like, Mahomes can outscore Kirk Cousins by, 2 to 5 points, which gives him the advantage. But that $1,300 pay down, right, could get you some points in other spots, especially running back this week. That'll help you out. So Kirk Cousins 6,900. I don't have him in cash right now, right? I still think Kansas City has a good, very undervalued defense. I don't think they're given the credit enough that they should, just because of how good Kansas City's offense is. But yeah, Kirk Cousins 6,900 is a play I like a lot. Joe Burrow, I do have his cash, and this one's the riskiest one, right? You look at all the numbers here, all the numbers, right, of starting quarterbacks, even Zach Wilson, and you know who's the lowest? Is Joe Burrow. 8.6 fantasy points a game. It's clear that the injury is holding Joe Burrow back, right? The Cincinnati Bengals offense that we saw last year has not appeared yet this year. I personally think it's not the play calling as much as Joe Burrow being limited and not being able to do what he does to help his very, very talented receivers. Even the run game hasn't looked as great as it has But against a team like Arizona who plays really tough, but the talent is just not there, I would look for a team like Cincinnati to have a bounce back week after a very disappointing game against Tennessee last week. See here, 22.1 fantasy points per game. Two quarterbacks that Arizona allows. So I think Cincinnati is just outside the top 10 of pass block advantage of all games, not just Sunday main slate. You can tell me I get a 6,200 Joe Burrow against Arizona in the beginning of the season. Yeah, Joe Burrow would have to be hurt for me to not play him. So 6,200, right? 2,000 off of Patrick Mahomes. I think Joe Burrow's a great cash play. He's got that upside of 25 plus fantasy points, him and Jamar Chase, even him to Mixon, right? Those little quick passes they have to Mixon. Watching T. Higgins' status, Irv Smith. So 6,200 Joe Burrow, I think is a great cash play. I think it's a really good bounce back game for him. The way that Arizona's offense has been too, like you have to factor in Arizona's offense hasn't played bad. They've played pretty good, right? Especially with the talent they have there. They've played very good. So if Arizona's able to score on Cincinnati, right, which they should be able to based off of what I've seen of Arizona's offense and Cincinnati's defense, Joe Burrow should be able to either one, they get out to a really good lead, or two, they're in behind and they're throwing the ball a lot. So Joe Burrow 6,200 love. CJ Stroud I have as a tournament play, rightfully so, right? I hated him last week. Not him. I hated the matchup he had last week. Let me stop that. I hated the matchup he had last week. His entire offensive line was hurt. Was playing a really good defensive line. Defense in general. The secondary obviously not as good, but CJ Stroud is still balling out. It does not matter. Apparently, it does not matter who's on his offensive line. He's still going to find his weapons, and he's making his weapons shine pretty bright. So 6,000 CJ Stroud. He's not there for me in cash. I think Atlanta's got one really solid defense. I think that defense is playing very, very good. So Stroud just not there for me in cash, right? I'd pay up for Burrow or kind of pay down for Stafford here. But I think getting exposure with CJ Stroud, even against this Atlanta defense, is worth it. Just we've seen what Stroud's done all season. Like, he's outperformed expectations, clearly leading the Rookie of the Year vote, right? I think Bijan's there too, but CJ Stroud is just standing out. And then, yeah, Matt Stafford, 5,600 I have as a cash play as well, right? Going against a Philly defense, and they have some injuries there, right? We all know how good the defensive line is. I won't say the box because their linebackers aren't playing good. But their secondary has some really good pieces. Darius Slay, Bradbury, Blankenship, but we've seen them give up 30 points to Washington's offense, right? We've seen them allow a lot to Minnesota's offense. Philly's, their defense just isn't what it was. They lost some key pieces, and they've had some injuries, unfortunately. But Matt Stafford, you look at his number, 17.5 fantasy points a game, playing a Philly team with 22.8, right? And we've seen Matt Stafford succeed without Cooper Kupp. Puka's ridiculously stepped up for that Rams offense. Tutu Atwell has taken a big leap, right? I think the leap that people were kind of expecting when he joined that team and had the opportunity, right, to compete with Van Jefferson for wide receiver 2. We all knew it was Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp was going to get a lot of targets, but Tutu just didn't stand out. With the opportunity of Cooper Kupp out, even with Puka getting as much work, Tutu stepped up. But now we get Cooper Kupp. We get Cooper Kupp. We get Puka. Like, this is something people are waiting to see. And it could be bad, right? You on the aspect of Puka's not demanded, but gotten a lot of targets and opportunities from Stafford. But you know Cooper Kupp is also going to get that as well. And we saw Matt Stafford last year where they got Allen Robinson, and Allen Robinson seemed like a really good piece, right? A really good catchable target, like somebody you throw the ball to is going to catch it, right? Not going to get separation, not going to beat you downfield, none of that. But you throw him the ball 5 to 10 yards, he's going to catch it, right? They just didn't use him. They used nothing but Cooper Kupp last year. They used Tyler Higbee quite a bit, but Matt Stafford is getting the ball out to all of his wide receivers, his tight end, his running back, right? Kyron Williams, definitely getting some volume there. But now we see him with Cooper Kupp. So this is going to be a big test for the Rams offense. This is going to be a big test for Stafford. We've seen in the past with Stafford just really utilizing his wide receiver one and making it difficult for the rest of the receivers because sometimes they are open and he just relies on that wide receiver one. We saw it with Kenny Galladay. We definitely saw it with Calvin Johnson. We saw times, though, where he used his wide receiver too, right? But when he gets focused, it seems like it's very hard to get him out of it. But 5,600 for what Matt Stafford and that offense has done against this Philly team who has a high team implied total. Rams, it's a bet to take is opposing offenses against offenses that are really good, right? Philly's got a really good offense, whether it's in the pass or the run, so the opposing team has to throw. That's it. It's been going on for a long time. But Matt Stafford, 5,600, right? I think is a big test. I have him as cash play. There's not a lot of plays at quarterback this week. He's one that I really like. And then 2 tournament plays, right? Ryan Tannehill. These are values as well, right? But I definitely want some exposure in tournaments. Ryan Tannehill against Indy secondary, ridiculously bad. Lower total, so it's not like Ryan Tannehill is expected to throw 2 or 3 touchdowns. But possibly getting Treylon Burks back. Indy's run defense has been fairly good, I'd say. But 4,900 is a cheap price for a quarterback against this defense. And it's the same thing for Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, 20 fantasy points last week against Kansas City. Now gets to face the worst defense in the league. Zach Wilson you could play Zach Wilson. I'm totally okay with playing Zach Wilson, right? Obviously, the Jets' run game, I think he's going to be really good this week, and we're going to talk about running backs here in a second. But Zach Wilson against Denver secondary, I definitely think you could easily play him in cash, and you don't need a lot out of him, right? If Patrick Mahomes scores 35 fantasy points, but you're paying $8,200 for him, and I think $7,300 for Kelsey, and then you pay Zach Wilson at $4,900, right? That's almost half the salary of Mahomes. He just has to get half the points, essentially, right? Just do what Aiden O'Connell did to allow you to pay up at other positions. So Zach Wilson, 4,900, I think is a really good play as well. Now on to running back. Saquon, we're watching the injury status. Nothing as of right now. If he's in, maybe. I like Bijan. I really like Bijan this week, 7,700. He's been a solid piece overall. I still think he's being underutilized. Obviously, they don't want to overuse him. Tyler Algier is doing good, right? Tyler Algier looked good for Atlanta last year, so why not use him and not get Bijan, kind of fatigued halfway through the season? Like, let Bijan be explosive as he can week in and week out. But 7,700 against this Houston defense. Houston defense, Atlanta's run block advantage is the best by far. There are 2 really good run block advantages, and that's Minnesota and Atlanta. And Atlanta's got a 20% over Minnesota, and Minnesota's way above everybody else at that. So, Texans giving up the 3rd most rushing touchdowns to running backs. It's going to be a close game. Bijan being used in both the run and pass. So 7,700, I still think is cheap for a Bijan-esque running back. So he's definitely somebody I'm paying up for at running back if I can. Derrick Henry I have as a tournament, 7,500, averaging 91.9 rushing yards a game to Indy if you count in the receiving work. He's getting at least 10 fantasy points just on the ground alone against Indy. That's not counting touchdowns, anything like that, receptions. That's just yardage. So at least 10 fantasy points you're getting out of Derrick Henry. The Colts defense, like I said, has been very good. DeForest Buckner is still one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. But Derrick Henry hasn't been King Henry. He's been Derrick Henry. So that's something to factor in. Tajay Spears getting some volume out of that Tennessee backfield. David Montgomery, 6,600 is my next cash play. I thought for sure last week that they were Jahmyr Gibbs was going to get used more. He's not. They want David Montgomery. They clearly want him. to be their lead back. They want to use Jahmyr Gibbs too, but it's clear David Montgomery, the red zone back, the everything back, right? Even in the receiving game being used, and now facing a really good matchup in Carolina, who's given up a lot of fantasy points to running back. Having the third best PFF run block advantage on a touchdown streak at that. Third most red zone rushing attempts, David Montgomery. Like, a lot stands out as a positive for David Montgomery. Haven't heard too much about the injury, so seems like he's starting to recover from that fully. Joe Mixon, 6,400 against Arizona. I mentioned the pass game, but this looks like Joe Mixon's breakout game, right? Breakout as far as what we've seen in the past and what we know Joe Mixon is capable of. Another top 10 run block advantage according to PFF. 6,400 I think is a great price for him, even being used in the receiving game against Arizona. Alvin Kamara, 6,300 I have as a tournament play right now, going against the Patriots, who play running backs okay, right? I think pretty average. 14 targets last week, 13 receptions, but only 33 yards. But man, it's clearly you saw what Derek Carr was, and Taysom Hill apparently, but Derek Carr was able to do for Josh Jacobs in a way of making him a really good fantasy running back. And this is not just saying Derek Carr did it. Obviously, Josh Jacobs did it, but getting him some opportunities as well to show what he's made of. That's what Derek Carr did. 13 targets. Now, I don't think we're getting, or 14 targets. I don't think we're getting anywhere near 14 targets again for Kamara, but to say 7 or 8 targets isn't impossible against a New England team who lost their best rookie corner. Their best corner was a rookie. Obviously lost Judon, lost another corner in Jones, I believe, as well. So there's some injuries on that defense. I like New Orleans a lot in this matchup. They're probably going to disappoint me, right? One of the most disappointing teams so far in the NFL, I'd say. They're 2-2, but it's a disappointing 2-2. But Kamara I have as a tournament play as of right now. Raheem Mostert I think is a good tournament play. I think Devon Achane is definitely the cash play, but tournament play you can go Raheem Mostert, right? Highest team total, used in pass game. The thing that concerns me is he's fumbled quite a bit, and teams don't like running backs that fumble. They don't. Devon Achane, don't have to worry about fumbling as of right now. He's $100 cheaper than Mostert, so you save $100, which most times isn't really that much. But 304 rushing yards in the last 2 games with 4 rushing touchdowns. Still got 2 receiving touchdowns in that week 3 game. But yeah, the highest team total, Devon Achane, getting the same red zone work as Raheem Mostert, but his red zone work looks a lot better than Mostert. So Devon Achane, 6,100, I think is a great cash play. If you're looking for a pay down, kind of pay up, a mid-tier Devon Achane, Bijan, definitely worth playable. DeAndre Swift, 6,000 is another one, $100 cheaper. It's seeming like these 6K running backs, right, have been paying off lately. DeAndre Swift, 6,000 against Rams, getting a lot of that red zone work for Philly's rush attack. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is going to get some. Kenneth Gainwell still getting some rushing attempts there. But I think what Swift's been able to do, right, 100-plus rushing yards in the last 2 out of 3 games at 6,000 against the Rams, right, is a good matchup, right? Top 10 PFF run block advantage, a very high team total, top 4, and standing out as the number 1 back for Philly. So DeAndre Swift, another great cash play. Jahmyr Gibbs I have as a tournament, right? It's a great matchup, same as David Montgomery. He just needs volume, right? The volume he does get looks good, but obviously they want David Montgomery first and then Jahmyr Gibbs second. Maybe to save Gibbs. I don't know. No one knows what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing with Jahmyr Gibbs. We're told they're going to use him in ways that people would not expect, and they're doing that. We would not expect them to not use him. But David Montgomery's played well, right? I guess. Alexander Mattison, 5,700 I have as a tournament play, right? I don't like the matchup against Kansas City's rush defense, but they do have the second best run block advantage. He gets a lot of red zone work, right? Even in the pass game, gets some targets in the red zone, so that's something to look at. But Cam Akers did look good for the small volume he did get for Minnesota, so that's something that concerns me. But Breece Hall, I think is the cheapest pay down as of right now, as of this second, right? Miles Sanders could be there. Maybe Chuba Hubbard, right, at 4,500, depending on the injury status. Detroit's played running backs really good, though, so that concerns me. But Breece Hall here at 5,400, I think is the cheapest running back that you go to in cash, regardless of what Salah says of they're taking the snap count or whatever and not unleashing him. If you've seen Dalvin Cook play this year, Dalvin Cook does not fit of what they want out of their running back. And it's not saying that Dalvin Cook is really playing bad, right? I think they're just not using Dalvin Cook in the way that Dalvin Cook should be used. They're trying to use Dalvin Cook in the way they want to use Breece Hall. If they use Breece Hall in the way they want to use a running back, then Breece Hall is going to explode, especially against this Denver defense. You saw Khalil Herbert have a really good game. You saw all Chicago have a really good game. Everybody's had a good game against Denver. Washington, right? Brian Robinson had a great game. Miami's running backs had a great game. Breece Hall at 5,400, I think is a great pay down at running back, right? I think there's a lot of great plays at 6K. Montgomery, Mixon, Achane, Swift, all great plays. But if you want to stack up Bijan and Breece Hall, right, you're looking at what you're paying for these two running backs. So you're paying, $13,000 for Mixon, Montgomery, or $12,700 for Montgomery, Achane, Mixon, Swift, $12,400. Combined Breece Hall and Bijan, right? And you're looking at 13-1. Obviously the highest of the mid-tier stacks, but you're paying down at one and you're paying up for one of two really good matchups. I really like Breece Hall this week being used in the receiving game as well, but just running the ball, I mean, he just looks so good, especially coming off of a major injury. Breece Hall at 5,400 is the last cash play I have and a really good cheap pay down. Gus Edwards I have there as a tournament play. Baltimore is just always going to run the ball a lot. Top 10 run block advantage. Just hasn't have great numbers. Hill, watching the injury status there. Rookie running back Mitchell might be able to see. So we'll see what that looks like. I don't think I'll put Gus Edwards at cash this week, but he is there. And then Tyler Algier is an interesting tournament play that I think if you're looking for a guy to, stand out in a milli maker, Tyler Algier is that guy, right? Bijan looks so good this week. Everything stands out as Bijan having a really good game this week, and I don't think he's had a bad game. But Algier gets a lot of volume as an RB2, and he gets more rushing attempts. Granted, I think Bijan gets way more red zone targets than Tyler Algier, but getting red zone rushing attempts against a team that's allowed the third most rushing touchdowns, Tyler Algier could have a 2-touchdown game, and at 4,700, he definitely pays off, right? He could definitely compete fantasy number-wise, not real stat-wise, fantasy number-wise with Bijan this week. And it's a $3,000 pay down. So Tyler Algier, I think, is a very sneaky play to look out for at running back this week. So that's all I really have at running back, guys. If you guys want this spreadsheet to have during game day, just click the link for our Discord. We have a very cheap subscription package. Can answer all the questions of what you get. So if you guys are interested in this, please click the link in the description. And I will see you guys in the next one.